Fame made them untouchable, until life reminded them they're human too.
It was the moment the room fell silent, the video playing behind him, a crowd of supporters watching, the chest exposed, a skull and crossbones glaring back under the theater lights. With a single camera angle, the controversy broke wide open. The tattoo inked long ago across the upper right of Graham Platner's chest resembled a symbol that many say needs no explanation. The lethal death's head of the SS Totenkopfverbände, the Nazi unit whose emblem still chills collective memory. About 20 years earlier, as a young Marine on leave, Platner had chosen this design not knowing, he now claims, that the emblem carried the weight of horror, hatred, genocide. And now, with his campaign for the U.S. Senate in peril, he pledged on national record to remove the tattoo. In that split second, the arc of his life, military service, oyster farming, a rising political star in Maine, met its reckoning. A mark, once unnoticed or inconsequential, now flashing red across headlines, social media, donor lists, and the conscience of a party. The heavy silence wasn't simply about ink or imagery. It was about identity, about history, about what one chooses to carry on the skin and in the soul. This is no ordinary scandal. It is a story of transformation, of regret, of self-exposure, literal and metaphorical, and of a man confronting a symbol he says he never meant to represent who he has become. As the sun rises off the rugged Maine coastline, the water shimmering like cracked glass, there is a man walking at dawn through the oyster beds of his small farm in Sullivan. His boots sink in mud, his hands rough from sea and salt, but his face is steady. That man is Graham Platner, a former Marine, an Army National Guard veteran, an oyster farmer who knew the tide of shells and the wind off the sea. A candidate unexpected, unorthodox for the U.S. Senate from the state of Maine. He is the kind of figure you might find at the tail end of a fishing trawl, elbow deep in oyster sacks, smiling at the gulls, greeting the lobstermen by name, tied into the land he grew up on. He has the veteran's bearing, straight back, steady gaze, scar of service, but also the farmer's humility. The sea does not care for brass or medals. It only cares for grit, for tides, for tomorrow's harvest. Platner's story begins in the rugged woodlands of Maine, in a town shaped by cold winters and Atlantic storms. He enlisted young, determined, the Marine Corps, deployment to Iraq in 2005, east of Fallujah, then a later deployment to Afghanistan in 2010 with the Army National Guard. He returned home, built something of his own, small business, oyster farm, civic engagement, and then entered the most difficult arena of all, politics. In many ways, he felt prepared. Service, sacrifice, small-town roots, outsider energy. He pitched himself as the candidate who'd bring that no-bull service mentality into the U.S. Senate race in Maine against the long-serving incumbent. But beneath the polished message and the sea salt straightforwardness, there lay complexity. A young man haunted by memory, by war, by the choices made in the midnight hours of youth. Now, in October 2025, that complexity has come to define not just his campaign, but a personal reckoning. As we follow Graham Platner's journey, what emerges is not simply a politician under fire, but a person confronting the intersection of who they were, who they've become, and the symbols they carry on their body and in their conscience. What follows is the story of his best moments, the defining moments, and then the full arc of the controversy, the tattoo, the apology, the fight for redemption, the sea salt air of Maine, and a body politic that demands more than service. It demands awareness. Young Marine Graham Platner, newly arrived in Iraq, the dust swirling around him, the sun setting hard over the desert horizon. He is now part of Kilo Company, 3rd Battalion, 8th Marines. He leads his section, machine gun mounted, scanning the broken buildings. He is far from home. But in that moment, amid fear, adrenaline, purpose, he feels alive, connected. He lands back in the States later that year, changed, hardened, haunted. His service becomes the bedrock of his identity. Years later, after the uniforms are folded away, the votes counted, the deployment's over, he walks through his oyster farm in Sullivan before dawn. The sea is flat, the air sharp. He lifts an oyster out of the water, brushes away mussels, holds it up to the light, small in his palm, part of the rhythm of nature, part of a new life he built. The machines of war replaced by the tide. The machine gun replaced by the oyster rake. He smiles, softened but steady. He found something else. Purpose. Yes, but also peace. In early 2025, he announces his run for the U.S. Senate. The plates are crashing. The decline of Main Street farming, the rising tide of coastal concerns, the veteran voice. He enters with conviction. "I don't want business as usual," he says. The main crowd responds. At town halls, he talks of rebuilding, of service, of the fishermen as part of the solution. A new narrative: veteran, outsider, farmer, changemaker. These moments, service, cultivation, promise, are the peaks. They carry emotion, hope, integrity. They build the stage on which the drama of his current moment unfolds. The story begins not under theater lights, but under the harsh lights of war and of youthful recklessness. In 2007, while on leave in Croatia with fellow Marines, then in his early 20s, Graham Platner found himself in a tattoo parlor. A night of shore leave, beer, and camaraderie. The wall of designs included a skull and crossbones, a standard military-type motif, menacing, bold. It appealed in the moment. He chose it. He and comrades inked the image and walked out into the Croatian night with laughter, thrill, a sense of being invincible. That skull and crossbones lay hidden under his shirt for years. He says he never connected it to the Totenkopf, the death's head symbol adopted by Nazi units, most notoriously the SS Totenkopf Verbände, who administered concentration camps. He says, in the nearly 20 years since, this hasn't come up. Meanwhile, he carried on his life. He enlisted, his records revealed the Marine deployments, then joining the Maryland Army National Guard in 2009, and deploying to Afghanistan in 2010 as a rifle team leader. On his return, he used the GI Bill to attend university, but struggled with undiagnosed PTSD and combat injuries, eventually stepping away from the path he expected and returning to Maine. Back home, he didn't fade into obscurity. He took up oyster farming in Sullivan, Maine, this small coastal town where the tide still dictates the day's rhythm. He started working at a small farm in 2018, eventually took it over, expanded operations, took on harbor master and planning board roles. In many ways, he anchored himself. He found a place to breathe. He married. He built a quieter life. For a moment, the story looked complete. Service, return, reinvention, purpose. But life, as ever, has more twists. Enter the 2026 U.S. Senate race for the state of Maine. With the long-serving Republican Susan Collins expected to run, the Democrats sensed opportunity. Among several candidates, Graham Platner stepped forward. With the backing of progressive elements, including Bernie Sanders, he became the insurgent, a veteran, an outsider, the man from the oyster beds, promising to shake up the status quo. Then came the resurfacing. First it was the old Reddit posts, 2013 to 2021, Younger, less polished versions of himself, posting controversial comments, mocking the idea of sexual assault victims, questioning black tipping habits, denigrating rural white Americans. "Why don't black people tip?" one read. "For those of you who have read these things and been offended, I am deeply sorry," he said in a YouTube apology video. The internet doesn't forget. The opposition research doesn't. The campaign's own disclosures. But then, the tattoo video. On the liberal podcast Pod Save America, his campaign released a seemingly innocuous video. Platner lip-syncing at his brother's wedding, shirtless, dancing to Miley Cyrus's Wrecking Ball. It was meant to humanize. Instead, it humanized and exposed. The skull and crossbones tattoo was plainly visible on his chest. Comments and headlines exploded. The image resembles the symbol used by Hitler's SS units. The Anti-Defamation League weighed in. The tattoo had apparently survived 2 decades of military service, including background checks and physicals. "I am not a secret Nazi," Platner said in the podcast interview. "I got the tattoo in Croatia. I was very inebriated," he went on. "It was not until I started hearing from reporters and DC insiders that I realized this tattoo resembled a Nazi symbol. I absolutely would not have gone through life having this on my chest if I knew that." But his former political director, Genevieve MacDonald, resigned and said, maybe he didn't know it when he got it. But he got it years ago, and he should have covered it up because he knows damn well what it means. What makes it cinematic isn't just the ink. It's the collision, service and scandal, the C and the symbol, a veteran, and the shadows of extremism. Platner's campaign now stands at a crossroads. Either reckon with this moment and move beyond it, or collapse under its weight. He has pledged to remove the tattoo, or at least cover it. He said he heard nothing from military reviews, physicals, security clearances. He worried. "The absurdity here is that I've lived my entire life with this thing, and it's never come up." But the challenge is deeper than removal, because a tattoo is skin deep. What does dark ink say about dark times? What does a mark made in youth say about accountability in middle age? As the campaign unfolds, the story expands. Donors withdraw. Supporting groups question. Democrats whisper of disqualifying behavior. Some rally around him. Sanders still endorses Platner. Others say the past cannot be buried. In Maine, the race watches. Primary opposition looms. Governor Janet Mills could enter. Donors weigh risk. Voters ask, can this man still stand for change? The tattoo has become both symbol and allegory, the visible mark of hidden history, of youthful recklessness meeting sober scrutiny. The oyster beds remain, the sea still rises, but the campaign is no longer about tides and shellfish. It is about identity, memory, consequence. In the quiet hours of the night, Platner returns home to Sullivan. The tide is out. He walks the dock. The oyster cages sit inert. He rubs his chest, feels the scar of ink beneath. He wonders, did I know? Should I have known? Can I erase the mark and the moment? Or do I live with it and attempt to redeem it? His apology is public. For those who have read these things, for those who saw someone you don't recognize, I am deeply sorry, he said, referring to his Reddit posts. He reiterated his opposition to fascism and anti-Semitism. But images echo. The skull image is not easily forgotten. The question, does the candidate seek to stifle scrutiny or to change, genuinely? The campaign machine kicks into gear. Focus groups, damage control, video statements, the pledge to remove the tattoo. But the story remains cinematic. The veteran standing before a crowd, chest exposed, the sun behind him, and a question in every eye. Who is the man under the ink? Who are you now? And who were you? In the final act unfolding now, the battle lines are drawn. Supporters rally. He served. He apologized. He's moving forward. Critics reply, symbols have power. Actions have implications. The sea washes again. The tide returns. The oyster cages shift in the dark, silent. The candidate looks out across the water and knows one thing clearly. Whether this campaign succeeds or fails, this tattoo will mark a turning point in his story, an indelible moment of reckoning. And perhaps one day, the ink will be gone, the skin smooth. But the memory, the story, the symbolism will remain. In the end, what matters is not just the image removed, but the man changed, the accountability assumed, the promise renewed. Because in politics, as in life, the past does not vanish. It only transforms. And for Graham Platner, this is his transformation moment. The water churns, the dawn light breaks on the horizon, and the journey continues. Scarred, uncertain, real. If you've walked this journey with me, from dusty Iraq roads to the oyster farms of Maine to the front row pressure cooker of a U.S. Senate campaign, then I invite you to stay with this story. Subscribe, follow, share, like this video or article and ring the bell. It matters. Because stories like these are not just about one man's tattoo or one campaign's crisis. They are about all of us. How we reckon with our past, how we carry our symbols, and how we step forward into what we want to become. Stay for the next chapter, because the tide in Maine is turning, and the world is watching.